So Atlus has finally decided to release the new Persona 3 DLC, The Answer. Persona 3 Reload is probably my favorite game of the year so far. I mean, the amount of variety that game offers, just the way they remade everything from that game, it just proves how talented Atlus is and just can be when they just get their stuff together. I mean, really, like, just the art style for the game, the remade soundtrack, the gameplay mechanics, everything just blends in so well. And personally, for me, it is just superior in basically every single way than its predecessor. I mean, I to the point that I don't really see a reason as to why I should return to the original version when this game just kind of makes everything much better. For those of you who sort of want a better, I guess, opinionated piece on what I think of the game, just check out the video I made recently. It is a full, I think, 30-minute review just touching on everything that makes the game just so phenomenal, and the occasional sort of, like, I guess, cons that translate through the remake process. But anyway, for those who have played the original Persona 3, just like me, you guys know that there is an extra piece of content called The Answer, which is basically the epilogue to the Persona 3 storyline. So sort of a heads up for anybody who hasn't played Persona 3 yet, like Reload or the base version or whatever. I will be discussing some spoilers, but do not worry. I'll put some timestamps, and I'll put like a freaking like spoiler alert screen whenever it happens. I'll try to keep it sort of like light spoilers, even though it's going to be a bit hard to, because this is literally the epilogue chapter of the original base game. But I will, again, just warn you guys where to skip and stuff if you guys want more like a, I guess, surface level like review on what I feel on the episode as a whole without discussing some story spoilers or whatever. But coming back to the topic, The Answer is one of the most polarizing episodes or just pieces of content in the entire Persona medium. You can probably ask anybody who has played the original Persona 3, and whenever they ask them if they played The Answer, they'll probably look at you with like the 1,000-yard stare. Basically, hopefully I said that correctly, but yeah, they'll basically look at you that way. Like just a swarm of memories will probably flash by, and they'll get a lot of PTSD. The thing that made the original Answer so polarizing for many was that it was an episode or DLC episode that just didn't really reward the player that much. Like, especially like the journey to get to the story segments, it was just a pain in the ass. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. As someone who's unfortunately endured the type of suffering this summer in preparation for the remake version of DLC, I just really was not having fun at all. Even though it's technically like short content, probably took me like 2 or 3 days to complete. I just kind of felt miserable the entire day. It felt much more like a chore, like a day job, than it did like an actual like video game that you're having fun with. Basically, it's just 30 hours of you going through this cycle of hammering through floors, grinding levels. And by the way, the original Persona 3, for those who didn't play it, has some of the worst leveling up systems, I think, in JRPG history. Like, you barely get XP when it comes to the floors. You gotta pray to God that you get XP in some occasions because you can get easily one-shot, and then a bunch of shadows will gang up on you, and you are basically just like meat to them, in a way. But aside of that, it's just that the gameplay loop of just like getting through floors and getting sort of a, I guess, cutscene, and then doing that cycle like 7 times until you get to sort of the more major like battles and stuff, was such an obnoxious, just sort of, I guess, placement in the game. It was such an obnoxious gameplay loop to the point that everybody who played it just really hated it. And that's why The Answer has such a polarizing, like, just perception or definition, because nobody wants to go back and do the same tedious process just to get to the cutscenes or story bits that the game has to offer, which isn't really a lot. There isn't that many story bits that the game offers. In terms of the storyline of The Answer, it basically follows that right after the events of Persona 3, we sort of see the cast of characters kind of like a bit let down. Some of them just still haven't let go of the passing of the main character, but at the same time, they're sort of progressing through life. I think it's been exactly a year since the events that transpired. They're moving out of the dorms, you know, since there's some that are graduating. I think it's Akihiko and Mitsuru who are graduating and going to college. and the rest basically have to just part ways and find some other dorms because I think the collegiate group just stopped facilitating the dorms after the things that happened, and they just have to basically move out and just continue on with their lives, go their own separate ways in a way. When all of a sudden, in one night, I think it's supposed to be March 31st, there is basically this intrusion, which this sort of robot character, which turns out to be Metis, which is Ike's sister, sort of like intrudes the moment in the middle of the night and sort of warns everybody to say that there is sort of an endless loop going on in that night or that day. And the only way to get out of the loop is to sort of go through the dungeons and levels that you proceed through the game to find the answers, as the title suggests, as to why the thing is happening, as to why they're stuck in an endless loop, in an endless cycle. Parts of the answers as to why they're stuck in an endless cycle is sort of given away by the flashbacks as to what led each of the characters to basically find and awaken their personas. This sort of like narrative concept isn't particularly bad. I think it's pretty interesting actually, and it's kind of a cool update to see where everybody was left off mentally and emotionally after the events that's described after the ending. Me personally, I'm a bit more of a fan of like how they ended the base game, to sort of like a metaphorical like way, or sort of an allegory to peace and tranquility and him finding the answer to life and stuff like that. But it's okay to continue on the story if they want. Just make it worthwhile. My problem with this thing was that the original answer failed at that. Nothing was really worthwhile, and everything felt muddy, just work, and everything basically takes place in the dorm, and then like a door that goes to Palladium Mall for any resources that you need. There basically was no sort of like bonding activities or dialogue between characters. It was just go to the dungeons, work, get the flashback, and do the cycle, as I said, 7 more times, and then fight some major boss events. So my prediction for the remake was that it would at least try to make it much looser, or just try to, I guess, justify the need for the loop that the game has. Maybe provide some sort of activities and bonding for the characters. Maybe kind of like write in Metis in a way that she becomes a bit more accessible or approachable or lovable. Because in the original, I don't think she was a terrible character, but there weren't that many reasons for me to really care about her. Yes, I understand that, she is the other half of Aegis, and she's constantly in the lookout for her, and she wants to feel accepted between the group, since she never was accepted anywhere. She never had any sort of bonding. She feels like an outcast. I understand that concept, but I feel that there wasn't like a good like bond between her. It felt like it didn't feel like there was enough reasons for me to care or have sympathy with her. So after playing the original version of the game a couple of months ago during the summer, and now just fast forwarding now here to the reload version, I was very excited to play a reload version because I was like, you know what? The base game was freaking amazing. I do think they can fix the issues when it comes to the original. And unfortunately, they really didn't do enough to justify the price range. And I want to address the elephant in the room, which is the price. This DLC, I think it costs like $35. In my case, I had to pay like around $40-something because PlayStation loves to tax me. I genuinely felt like I was upset. I was super upset from the freaking tax. But anyway, with $35, I was like, wow, that seems oddly expensive for DLC. Now, I paid like almost $50 for Shadow of the Erdtree, which came out this summer, and that is the greatest DLC I've played since Blood and Wine. Genuinely incredible and was worth every single dollar. And at the back of my head, I was like, what the heck inflates this price to that sort of like price range? And apparently, Atlus, being Atlus, basically just forced players to purchase an expansion pass that could, like, I guess, takes in the 2 other expansion waves, which, spoiler alert, wasn't that much. It was basically just cosmetics for a single player game, in which, look, I know that cosmetics in a single player game can be cool, especially in JRPGs and stuff, but I'm paying $35 for cosmetics and the actual content that I tried to pay the money for. Are you kidding me? Like, it was cosmetics and some extra soundtracks. Why? Literally, why? There's nothing to justify that price range. That means that the answer could have been comfortably just $20. and they're just adding these extra stuff to just inflate it to that like price range. And my question is, how the hell do cosmetics add up to $35 something with the DLC included? It just boggles my mind. I of course knew the DLC was not going to be perfect because remakes in general, especially the Persona 3 remake, was very faithful to the original one. Not like a one-by-one copycat of like the systems and everything. It definitely revamped itself and created something that I consider to be superior and something that's more accessible for those who don't want to go to the original and spend countless hours grinding over something they don't want to grind over. But unfortunately, when it comes to this version of the answer, it basically just copies the mistakes that the original answer did. And that is that you are basically forced at points to grind and grind and grind and grind. Which was basically like the worst part the game had to offer. It was like, most of the time I'm grinding through this game that I actually am fighting bosses. And by the way, when it comes to the bosses in like the answer, which was still like, when I'm talking about the answer, I mean like overall, even in the remake, those bosses were never fun. Those bosses were always super tanky bosses that just felt like filler. And you constantly ask yourself, why the hell would someone want to design these bosses? Or why would someone willingly want to just play these bosses over and over and over? Which then got me thinking as to, am I even enjoying the DLC? Am I even enjoying playing through this? And the answer to that, no pun intended, was not really. Throughout the course of just this almost 30-hour journey that I had, it could have been much shorter. I think at the 17-hour mark, I was basically at endgame. But I had to grind, and the freaking boss fights more toward the end are just like 20 times harder than it was in the original. I'm not saying it's like impossible or whatever, or like to get through. Like I got through it. It's just that the HP, like the health bar, are just even tankier. And the thing is that like throughout this game, I felt that it was an unbalanced mess at times. Like there were some bosses that were just extraordinary, like just super tanky, and it felt like almost like there was no end at sight to like kill them. Yet like the next boss that you encounter a couple more levels up was like the simplest thing ever that you can kill in 5 minutes. So in the back of my head, I was like, what is going on with this game? It feels unbalanced. It feels like the RNG of the game is just terrible. It's just throwing random shit at the wall that never sticks. There are so many moments in the remake version that I kind of kept on asking myself, why am I like, what am I doing? Seriously, like, what am I doing? I know that there's like a gazillion other more doors that are waiting for me on the other end just to repeat the same thing, but just with a much more harder process. And there's some boss fights in here that just feel unfair. Like, they're just be like resistant to almost every single spell and stuff. And it just takes like easily like 20 or 30 minutes just to try to get through these things, because they'll pull out a critical attack on one of your random characters and have an extra attack and just destroy you. And by the way, I don't know who had the idea that spoiler alert for the final boss, when you land a critical on the final boss, you for some reason cannot get like an extra like one more attack. Why? Who designed that? If the final boss could get an extra 1-up attack on the player, what sort of like logical advantage thing is that? Like, what sort of logical conclusion is that? It's not fun. It makes it a huge disadvantage that makes it annoying. Now, I will give Atlus this. I'm really glad that they actually like listened to the fans and actually put the compendium in the Velvet Room. I do not know why in the original answer the compendium did like not exist in terms of like summoning the personas you've collected. Like, seriously, who had the idea of doing that? That just basically makes like the fusion process almost like just pointless at times. Like, why am I fusing so many of these things, or so many of these like personas, if I can't even like summon them if I were to lose them by accident or something? Like, what? Seriously, like, what was the thought process behind the original? I really do not understand. Another thing that I really want to touch on is that in terms of the narrative, again, it's basically the same thing from the original answer. It's the same moment, same thing. If you play the answer, you know what happens. It's the exact same thing. But what sort of infuriates me a bit in this DLC is that none of the side activities that are given are voiced. Why isn't it voiced? That's literally what made Persona 3 Reload stand out on its own. Almost every single piece of dialogue in the game was voiced. It was something that was very interactive. I felt myself much more emotionally attached to the characters. It made some of the like considered the worst social links in the game, in the original game, become some of the better social links in the game in Persona in general. Like seriously, that's not much of a drastic difference voice acting can have in general. So why is there such a lack of it in the activities that the original game did? And also like the sort of small like social activities that can go on in the game are so small to the point that it's like, what even is the purpose of creating them other than giving the character characteristics or giving them something to, I guess, make their character stronger? Like, at that point, I'll just press the fast forward button just to get the characteristics and ditch the entire dialogue. It doesn't give anything special. It doesn't create anything of a memorable moment between these short conversations. That's all they are. It's like super short conversations that aren't memorable or aren't funny or aren't anything. They don't serve really any purpose aside of just giving you a power at the end. The thing that Atlus really missed the mark with is that they kind of forgot what made Persona stand out in general, or just Persona 3. It is the characters, it is the voice, it is how the characters react to stuff. They basically skipped through all of that and just said, you know what? Let's focus solely in the dungeons, and let's try to make the unbearable Tartarus, or the unbearable abyss of time that was in the original, into something that is, I guess, more accessible, but still unbearable. In terms of the OST of the game, just like always, Persona has bops when it comes to the OSTs. There are some new songs I heard sprinkled throughout the answer. And I thought those new songs were pretty cool. You know, it added more diversity to the soundtrack. I didn't feel like completely bored by it. And I think it gave you like a new remix of Mass Destruction. And I think even like a new battle song, which, hey, I thought both of those songs were cool. It was very cool. It got me grooving. It had me much more excited doing the monotonous gameplay loop that the game offers. I will say though, like mostly like at the beginning of the game, there's a specific song. And I will never forget this thing, because it was memed on Twitter before the game even came out, and I remember that thing. I remember hearing like the song, and I was like, this is not gonna come out in the game, but it actually did come out in the game, and I was laughing my ass off when the song just played. I probably can't play it because of copyright stuff, but there is this one song that has like these super, very loud and just whiny synthesizer that plays. It's like at a very high register, super high pitched. And it just sounds terrible. And it is like the most how can you mess this up thing of all time. Like compare that with the original and you'll like understand what I'm trying to say. It is like some super high pitches and it sounds like squeaky. It sounds like a freaking like toy like synthesizer you would give to a kid. It is genuinely like something that was like, wow, I wanted to take off my headphones when listening to that. I was like, there's no way this is coming from the game. It was that bad. It was genuinely that bad. And I do really want to talk about also that there's one theme that you kind of like hear when you're roaming around the hub in an abyss of time. It like, I don't think it's bad. It's fine. It's just that the remake version, wow, I feel that it lacks some like the interesting aspects from the original. The original had this beautiful harp playing at the time. It felt very astronomical, very like whimsical, very purgatory-esque, because that's what the Abyss of Time is supposed to represent. But the newer one just feels very safe. It doesn't feel as alive or as sort of like atmospheric as the original did. And that was a bit disappointing because I was a huge fan of the remake version of the Persona 3 because of the I guess sharper mixes that it has, the cleaner mixes and stuff, and I was helping a bit more. But I think overall, even the battle themes and most of the OST of this game is fine. It's cool. There's some great additions, some new changes and stuff, but those 2 or 3 songs that I mentioned, Jesus Christ, man, bro, take that back to the studio. Take that back to the studio, I beg of you. And I'm not expecting everything to be like the base game. There's so much you could do with making an entire game based on one single day and on one single area where you have like 7 different dungeons. Not really different. They're basically the same dungeons, just copy pasted. But my point is that there's just so much you could do with a limited space, I guess. And it feels that Atlus basically remade this DLC, because of the moral obligation that they had. Because aside of them just adapting Persona 3 FPS technically, like they were like, it basically feels incomplete if you don't adapt the answer, which is supposed to be, again, like the epilogue episode and tells you the full story. And it's funny because even after this, you'll still hear a bunch of Persona fans complaining online that they didn't put Kasumi. I'm sorry, not Kasumi. They didn't put Kotone. They didn't like put the female like branch and stuff, the female storyline. But yeah, I just genuinely think that this DLC, it really isn't that great. I don't think it's even near what they're asking for in terms of paying. And you can find Persona 3, I think even on Steam, because there's a deal going on. I thought I even saw on my PlayStation that it was in a deal for like $40. You can buy it for $40, which is basically like the exact same price amount that I paid for the DLC. You can buy a game that is over 60 hours long with a lot more content packed into it. And you would have a billion times more enjoyment. You would get a billion times more enjoyment from that game than you would playing this endless loop of just grind. And it surprises me that the remake version of the freaking answer of this game just kind of repeats the same issues and doesn't decide to correct them or do something much more interesting. It's just a reskinned version of the original game. That's it. That's basically what it is. That's what I'm trying to get at. It's basically what it is. It's a more tolerable reskin version. So my advice for those who just love the base game, if you really care that much about the narrative and what happens and stuff, basically, like, my advice would be to look at the cutscenes on YouTube. You would have much more entertainment than going through the 30-hour cycle this game has to offer. It genuinely is not even worth your time. It really isn't worth your time. And for those who are really interested to it and want to play, and you're like, you know what, I want to just, I love the base game so much. I'm very interested and curious as to what the answer gives and stuff. I mean, go ahead, but just please wait for a deal. It's not worth the price point. It really isn't. You know what you can buy in that price point? Literally what I said, the game. You can even get Persona 5 if you haven't played it for $23 on Steam. Yes, that's how good the Atlus deals are. You can get much more spending that money in other games. So yeah, that's basically what I think about the answer. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Yeah, I guess I'll see you guys next time. Peace out, everybody.